Today we will be examining the power of ideology. Ideology is something that informs one's verbal behavior, and verbal behavior can be broken down into two essential acts, that of benediction and malediction. Malediction is the use of speech acts for the purpose of shunning, and benediction is the use of speech acts for purposes of praise and prospering another person or one's self. And so when we look at ideology, ideology combines both benedictions and maledictions. Ideology determines there is a social class to be shunned and that there is a social class to be praised. In other words, the praxis of ideology is the process of the transfer of wealth from one social class to another. And this transfer of wealth is mediated by these speech acts. Ideology is not only related to speech acts, but it's also related to worldview. And power in the world is the process of being through time. And as one exists as a being through time, time moves through this being, flowering into space. And so, by the vector of ideology, the unfoldment of time into space is shaped, its flowering is shaped according to ideology. And so, the process of worldview is an exercise of power by a being because worldview shapes the way in which time unfolds through us because we're all occupants of the universe. Ideology and interpretation is power. And so with ideology, there is the power of interpretation and the power of speech acts. And so when people combine into a common ideology, this is the linking of powers of many minds towards a common goal. And this common goal is the process of determining who prospers and who does not, that which is favored and that which is not. In other words, we can say that the power of the mind is in its ability to both bless and curse. And ideology is the process of unfolding these blessings and cursings through speech acts. Because when we look at the modern world is basically a process of transferring power away from physical acts into symbolic acts. And speech is a symbolic behavior. But the process of being in the modern world, it's the story of physical acts being restrained in preference to speech acts. And this process exemplifies a shift of power into the speech. And so this is why ideology and the utilization of slogan, because slogan is the practice of ideology. So when we define slogan as the practice of ideology, this is how the powers of benediction and malediction are practiced in the modern world. It links to ideology and slogan. These are the powers. It is out of this collective mind that is determined by ideological activity that political destiny is manifest. And so first comes ideology and the power of the people. People power must be respected, and people power is ideology. And then out of this ideology grows sort of the official capacities of the state. And this is almost a reversal of what one would suspect, because the official powers of the state are very, well, very official. And this sort of lends the appearance that that might cause it to take precedence over the power of the people. But this is not really so, because state power grows out of people power, which is ideology. And ideology is the practice of slogan. And slogan can be divided into benediction and malediction. And the utterances of benedictions and maledictions amount to the transferring of wealth from one entity to another via symbolic activity, which is speech. And the reason why this is the state of things in the modern world, because the modern world is the sublimation of physical acts into speech acts via the process of history that has brought us to where we are now. And then, of course, related to ideology is something that could be called the power of presiding. And the power of presiding is simply watching. And so, if you think about the way in which a parent watches a child, by watching alone, by pure observation, the child is guided because the child has a sense of what the parent approves of and what the parent disapproves of. And so, by these combined forces of approval and disapproval, and even though it's subliminal and not stated, it still can have the effect of guiding the child. And so, the process of study of ideology is not only learning the utterances of benediction and malediction, but attitudes of approval and disapproval, which lend to ideology the imparting of the power of presiding. And so, a believer in an ideology, they have the power that a parent has over a child. They have the power that a parent has over a child, and that's a parent. And so, as human beings, we can be described as talking apes. And as talking apes, the significance of our actions has been invested into our speech. In other words, we can be considered creatures of utterance, creatures of malediction and benediction, and every utterance can be seen as a talisman. And so this is why throughout history you have people studying things like the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, because they're looking for sets of speech acts that can deliver upon themselves and their people prosperity. But it's not only ancient texts that one looks to find this sort of thing. For example, Marxist theory. These are basically sets of incantations, no different than any of these religious books. And so so people, they like to look through um, these various ancient and modern books to help guide their speech acts. Who do I like? Who do I dislike? What do I like? What do I dislike? Who is the favored and who is disfavored in accordance with not necessarily society per se, but in accordance with what prospers me most within society. And so finding the correct ideology, finding the correct sets of benedictions and maledictions, the correctness of it can be defined by what places one in the proper position in relation to society.